This is Lenore Zann, and you're listening to The Medley with Blake Crash Priddle.
Welcome to this week's edition of The Medley. I'm Blake Crash Priddle, and today's guest has an absolutely huge resume. She's a singer, actress, and former politician, best known for voicing Rogue in the 1990s X-Men animated series. She's Lenore Zann. We're going to hear some behind-the-scenes stories about how she landed some of her iconic voiceover roles, as well as her journey towards becoming sober, and her career as a politician both provincially and federally. So sit back and relax as we listen to Lenore Zann tell us all about her amazing and inspirational life. You've had an amazing career, but how did it all start?
Oh my goodness, that is a large question. Well, it started in school, high school, grade 10, when I was cast as one of the leads playing Adelaide in Guys and Dolls. And once I got on stage, I realized that this was something that I really wanted to do, like, for a living. It just grabbed hold of me. So I started doing auditions for amateur theater in the province. I started going to Wolfville to the Kippewa Showboat Company run by Jack Sheriff, and played a number of lead roles there at a young age, including Louisa in The Fantastics, which was like one of the longest running shows on Broadway, a bunch of different musicals. And then I auditioned for the Neptune Theater and got in when I was 16, doing the musical Gypsy. And then again the next year doing shows, doing plays. And so by the time I was 17, I actually had enough professional shows under my belt to become a professional actor and to get my actor's equity card. Then I went to Toronto and I studied drama and political science for a couple of years, but in between, in the summers, I performed. And then I was discovered at the Charlottetown Festival the summer that I was there to understudy Anne in Anne of Green Gables, but I was chosen to play Marilyn Monroe in a rock opera on the life of Marilyn Monroe called Hey Marilyn by a Toronto composer and writer named Cliff Jones. And I did that out at the Edmonton Citadel Theatre, and that basically catapulted my career, and I really never looked back after that. And as I said, I was 19 when I was chosen to play Marilyn, and 20 when I did the show, and then that led to movies and television, and then animation in the end, radio. I won an award, and I stayed busy for many, many years.
Your most iconic role was Rogue in the X-Men animated series in the 1990s. Tell us the story about how you landed that awesome role. Well,
I had played a lot of American roles in American movies and TV that were shooting in Canada, both in Toronto and Montreal, and also out in British Columbia and Vancouver. And so my agent knew that I played characters where I did a Southern accent. And in 1991, she contacted me and said that they were casting a show, a new series, and they didn't have a name for it yet. They were just calling it an X series. And they needed a woman with a sexy, husky voice who could do a Southern accent, and that I should go and audition for it. Well, I hadn't done much animation at that point in time, and I was really considered myself sort of a serious actress in movies, TV, and theater. So I didn't go to those auditions, but then about a month, 2 months maybe later, she contacted me again in Toronto and said, Lenore, they haven't found the right actress for this part because I know it's you. So get your ass in gear and get down there to the studio and audition. So I did. I went down. I took a look at the character. There was a drawing of her what is now a classic Rogue pose with her hand on her hip and just looking with a sassy attitude. And I went, I like this character. I can play her. I can relate to her. And I went in the booth. The auditioners were in LA. All the producers and director were in LA. Put the headphones on, and I just read the first few lines of the little script that they had there for the character, and it was, my daddy liked to kill himself when he found out I was a mutant. Get out of my mind. I remember I had me a boyfriend when I was 13. Had me a boyfriend till I kissed him. Poor boy went into a coma for 3 days. It got so if I touched anybody, it just drove the life right out of him. I don't know, Beast. You know everything. What makes us like the way we are anyway? And after I did that little speech, which they had prepared, I heard these shrieks of excitement in Los Angeles where the producers were, and they said, "That's her. That's the one. Don't let her leave the building. That's Rogue." And the rest, as they say, is history.
You've done a lot of other voiceover roles in the past. Besides Rogue, you also did the voice of Wendy Waters on one of my favorite childhood series, The Rescue Heroes. Tell us about how you got the role of Wendy Waters, and how playing a hero like Wendy Waters is different from playing a hero like Rogue.
Well, to be honest, Rescue Heroes was, for me, just another one of the auditions that I did in Toronto. Once I had booked X-Men, I'd also booked another show called Stunt Dogs, and I played 3 characters in that. And so I was pretty active then in the voice world, and then I started booking things like radio commercials, TV voiceovers, things like that, and other animation as well. So when I went out for Wendy Waters, I really just used my own voice, and I liked the fact that she was a female firefighter, which at the time people still said firemen. They rarely said firefighting women. So I thought it was great that it was a female firefighter that children were seeing who was trying to help them remain safe in difficult situations. Yeah, I felt that it was really important at the time to be seen as a strong female heroine, and to also spread that image around in a young community so that they got used to the idea that women could be firefighters as well as men. And, one of my most important moments, I think, as a voice actor and a very moving time was after the 9/11 in New York happened, and I was living in New York and going back and forth between New York and LA and Toronto at the time, and I came back to New York after the catastrophe, after that terrible tragedy had happened, and there was a building-sized Wendy Waters blow up outside of Toys R Us in Times Square in the full New York firefighters outfits, and I couldn't believe it. It was really, really moving to see that and to know that my character had made such a difference in people's lives, and that they were using that image as a way of giving great credit to the New York firefighters, many of whom sadly lost their lives.
As I mentioned, I watched Rescue Heroes quite a bit as a kid, and my dad really enjoyed watching it with me because he used to be a safety officer at the mill in our hometown, and because of that, he really liked the way that they taught kids about safety, and then we would watch it together, and then we would talk about the safety lessons that were presented, and Wendy Waters was definitely one of my favorite characters because I looked up to her as a role model, as did many other kids.
Thank you so much. That's really nice to hear that story and to know that your dad watched it with you. And yeah, I liked doing a show that was about helping kids and educate kids how to stay safe, and instead of shows that are just about beating up the bad guys, so to speak.
And it certainly had a lot of good morals and a lot of good lessons that both kids and adults can live by.
Absolutely. Particularly working together, never leaving someone out behind, and not necessarily jumping into something by yourself, but making sure that you've got backup and that you're all working in tandem together to come to a positive end of whatever the situation is. I think that that's a really important one for kids to learn, how to work with others.
You also did the voice of Lorca, a dragon on the TV show Dragon Tales, who was in a wheelchair. How important do you think it is to have diversity in the media?
Absolutely. It's imperative. I loved the fact that I was able to play this little boy dragon, little 8-year-old boy dragon in a wheelchair. And I always remember Lorca saying things like, well, it doesn't matter that I can't use my legs because, I can do magic tricks. Want to see? So Lorca is always positive and optimistic and using all his talents to show people that he is just as important and just as necessary as others. And he always puts a smile on my face when I think of that character. And yes, we definitely need all kinds of inclusion in children's programming and in adult programming as well. I think things have gotten better, but I think that we need to make sure that we continue in that vein and don't fall back on just regular stereotypes.
There was an episode where Lorca told Max, think about what you can do, not what you can't.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Rogue was clearly your favorite voiceover role. Do you have a second favorite voiceover role?
Oh my goodness. I guess Wendy Waters would have to be one of them, but also I loved doing My Little Pony, and I played Starcatcher in that, who is a magical Pegasus pony who can fly like Rogue. She has rainbow hair and she can fly, and wherever she happens to land, or then magical things happen. And her signature sound was something like, whatever you wish, it shall be done. Very lyrical, very musical, very kind, very compassionate, and sort of every little girl's dream, really, of a magical fairy godmother. That's kind of the role that I played, and that was so much fun to do. I loved playing her. I also did a role in The Mummy for Universal Studios. I did that when I was in Los Angeles, and I played the mummy's girlfriend, Anaxunamun, who basically, he brings her back to life so he can have his partner forever and eternity, but she has other ideas, and that is she wants to rule the world herself without him. And her voice is something like, Imhotep, you used to be so handsome. So she has a way with a backhanded compliment.
Well, you've had an amazing career. I do know that you had some inner demons that you had to deal with, including addiction. How did you overcome those challenges?
I woke up one day and I realized that if I didn't stop drinking, I was going to die. And at the time, I was 36 years old at the time, and I had played Marilyn Monroe, as I'd mentioned, this rock opera on the life of Marilyn. And I played her at an early age, and I saw where Marilyn's demons took her, because she was an alcoholic too, and she was addicted to drugs, to prescription pills, and she died sadly, she died of an overdose of booze and pills. So I saw the writing on the wall, and she was 36 years old when she died. And at 36, I realized that I had to make a choice, to live or to die. And I chose life. I was in Los Angeles at the time, And I called up AA and I told them I was ready to stop drinking and that I would need help. And they sent me a beautiful, wonderful woman named Amanda, this beautiful Black woman who came and picked me up and took me to my first meeting on Martin Luther King Boulevard. And that community loved me back to health again and taught me that I really didn't know how to love myself, and that I was trying to fill my void with all these external things, which doesn't work. And they said, listen, we love you and we're going to love you and keep you company until you learn how to love yourself. And they did. And I've never looked back. I haven't had a drink since. This year, I believe it's my 27th year of sobriety. And I'm really glad that I made that choice and that I can actually help others as well and make them realize that it's not something to be ashamed of, that it's a disease, and that sadly some of us are born with it. In fact, many people have it in their family histories. It's not something that you can say, oh, you need to have more willpower, better willpower. It's not about willpower. It's a disease and we do need help. And so we need to reach out when we need the help and get it. And it is one day at a time. There's a reason they have that slogan, one day at a time. Just for today, I will not drink or pick up or whatever it is that one is addicted to, because you can deal with the feelings of one 24-hour period of abstaining from whatever it is you're addicted to, rather than thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to have another drink in my life. How am I ever going to do that? So I really believe in the 12-step program, and I highly suggest that anybody who might be suffering from any kind of addiction issues, the 12-step program really does work. So reach out.
Well, congratulations on all those years of sobriety. And I noticed on Facebook that
Thank
your
you.
sobriety led to the creation of a mocktail, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is named after a rogue.
That's right. Exactly. I think it was called Go Rogue or something like that. But there's been a few mocktails named for me, which I'm very pleased about. And that particular one, I think they came up with when I was at the San Diego Comic-Con last summer.
Alongside being an actress, you were also a politician. You were an MLA for your riding in Nova Scotia as well as an MP. What inspired you to pursue a career in politics?
I was good friends with an incredible female politician named Alexa McDonough from Nova Scotia, who was with the NDP, and she was the first female leader of any political party in Canada. First of all, she was the leader of the Nova Scotia NDP, and then she became federal leader of the federal leader of the national NDP. And she and I became friends when I was about 24 years old. I was doing plays at the Neptune again. By that time, I'd been asked back now that I was older and had played Marilyn, was professional. And she came to see the shows, and she loved my work, and I admired her. So one day, she invited me to come with her and job shadow her on an International Women's Day that year. I think it was around 1984. So I went up to the province house, to the House of Assembly in Halifax. I'd never been there before. And I was up in the gallery and looking down over the proceedings on International Women's Day. And here Alexa was, the only woman in the legislature with all these different men. And she was up on her feet giving impassioned speeches about what needs to be changed to make life better for everybody, including women. And the men that were there were basically not listening to her, calling, catcalling, talking, laughing, and throwing paper airplanes at each other. I honest to God, I could not believe my eyes. I was shocked. And afterwards, Alexa met me at the door and she said, "Yeah, we have to go over now to Mount St. Vincent, where she was going to be giving a speech about how far women have come for International Women's Day." We got in the taxi and she started crying and she said, "You saw what happened. This is what I have to deal with on a daily basis. And I'm supposed to go and give a speech about how far women have come. I don't even know what I'm going to say," she said. Well, I watched her then give an incredible speech, extemporaneous, that was so moving and so inspiring. And she had the whole room full of people at that university cheering for her. And she said, "Lenore, someday I would love it if you could join us and become a politician yourself, because I think you've got what it takes." And I said, "Well, I really appreciate that." And it was definitely something I would think about. But I said, I really felt I needed to have more age, more years, more experience, more wisdom, more gravitas, as we call it, so that people would actually take me seriously. And so it took me another, 24, 25 years. I was 49 when I moved back home to Nova Scotia. I was still an actor. I'd been acting all these years. And I was asked by the NDP in Truro if I would run for them provincially. So I called Alexa. I went up and saw her at her apartment in Halifax. And I said, "What do you think?" And she said, "You know what? It's your time. I'm ready to step back," she said. "I'm a grandmother. I want to spend time with my grandkids. I've done everything I can possibly do. You run. It's your time." So I ran that time, and I ended up winning 3 elections in a row for the NDP in the Truro area and becoming the MLA, only the second female MLA for this area ever. And so I gave 10 years to the party and to my constituents as a provincial MLA. And then I was asked by Prime Minister Trudeau if I would run federally, but under his banner. So I flew up to Ottawa and I met with the Prime Minister, and I also met with Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, because they were also interested in me running federally for them in Cumberland, Colchester. And after having an hour meeting with each one of them separately, I felt that Mr. Trudeau really expressed what I believe and what I needed to do and what we need to do together to move Canada forward in a progressive fashion. So I agreed to run. And then we won that election too. And that was in 2019. So that was 12 years that I was a politician, 10 provincially and 2 federally. And now I'm back acting, because shortly after that, the X-Men came calling and asking me if I'd come back and be an X-Men again. So, timing is everything, as we say in the business, in the acting business as well as politics.
I think one of your highlights of being an MP was the introduction of an environmental racism bill. What inspired you to draft that legislation?
I introduced a similar bill provincially first in 2014. It was called Bill 111, an Act to Address Environmental Racism. Environmental racism is the term used to describe the number of toxic waste sites, dumps, landfills, and toxic corporate polluters that are placed on or beside racialized communities. And there are disproportionately way more of these types of toxic polluters that are placed on or beside racialized communities, in particular Indigenous communities and Black communities. So Dr. Ingrid Waldron, who was a professor at Dalhousie at the time, she's the first one to come to me and ask me what could be done about this issue that she described to me. and Lynn Jones, who's a community activist and grassroots grandmother here in Truro. They talked to me about it. They explained to me what it was. I got it immediately. And I said, we right at the moment when this was brought to me in 2014, the NDP in Nova Scotia had just lost government. When I first ran in 2009, we became the first NDP government ever in Nova Scotia, and that was with Darrell Dexter as the premier. But we lost after only one term. That was in 2013. I ended up being one of only 7 MLAs for the NDP who retained our seats. There were 6 cabinet ministers and me. And so I said, look, we are the third party. We've only got these 7 seats. The bill will never pass. But how about if I introduce a private member's bill about environmental racism, knowing that it won't pass? However, if we can get it to the floor of the House for second reading, then that will force all of the politicians to have to debate the issue on the floor of the provincial House of Assembly for the very first time in history. And Ingrid and Lynn both said, that's a great idea. So that's what I did. And in fact, exactly what I said happened. It never did pass. However, it got traction. Lots of media picked up on it. It brought it to the public awareness. People started talking about, the fact that, they have experienced this environmental racism, and they start to notice it when it's happening. And I introduced it about 5 or 6 times within the 6 years that I was an opposition member. And then when I went federal, the very first thing I did, my first day up on the Hill, the same day that I got sworn in to be an MP, which was November 26th, 2019, I went straight to the parliamentary legal department and asked for lawyers who could help me draft a piece of legislation that would be federal, that would deliver a bill that I could introduce as a private member's bill again, that would address this issue across the province. And thus, it was called Bill C-230, and it was a national strategy to address environmental racism and environmental justice. And it made its way almost through the House, but then there was a snap election, and bang, that particular, my bill died on the floor, because that's what happens when there's an election called. And then I did not manage to retain my seat, sadly, here in Cumberland, Colchester. However, by this time I had made many friends in government in many different parties. So Elizabeth May, the leader of the Green Party, contacted me and said, Lenore, I love your bill. Would you mind if I reintroduce it? Since you're not here to do so. And I said, I would love you to do that, Elizabeth. And I flew to Ottawa, and I met with the Prime Minister and the Minister of Environment. And I asked them if they would support the bill, but coming from the Green Party of Canada. And they said they would. So now the bill is now Bill C-226. And it's still a national strategy to address environmental racism and environmental justice. And it has passed all the way through the House of Commons. And it is now in the Senate. And it has passed second reading. And it will be read for a third time. And if it passes third reading, it will become the law of the land. So this is a way to tell people, you know what? When you have an idea that whose time has come, you just have to keep at it. And there's more ways to skin the cat than just one way. So let's hope that it passes this time.
I read on your social media account that you're working on a memoir and a couple of new albums. What's the name of the new book?
I'm calling the book A Rogue's Tale, Awakening the Superhero Within, because it will cover the first part of my life where I had to face my own inner demons and come out strong and come out healthy, as well as booking the X-Men for the first time. And, I like to say, and I like to tell kids, we all have an inner superhero. We all have inner superpowers, but we have to figure out what they are. So, like, what's yours? And, in my life, I've had to keep delving into plummeting the depths and finding out where my strengths lie to help keep me going through sometimes some very difficult and dark circumstances. And everybody has those moments, and everybody has their challenges. So I'm hoping that my book can inspire others to also realize that they have unique superhero abilities as well, and they just have to discover them and work on them and bring them out into the light of day. So that's the name of the book. And then the album, I'm calling it Strong Enough. It's based somewhat on the same kind of theme, but also because one of the songs I do in it is a cover tune of a Sheryl Crow song called Strong Enough. And I think that it speaks to my strengths, and also to my image in the world right now. And I hope again that it will inspire other people. That's the idea behind it.
Well, Lenore, it's been a huge pleasure talking with you, and thank you so very much for your time today. Before we wrap up, how can people keep up to date with you?
They can follow me on Instagram, which is at Lenore Zann, LenoreZann. On Twitter, and I'm at Zann Lenore there. The last name is first. And on Facebook, I'm Lenore Zann. And I may not have my blue tick beside me anymore, but I think you'll be able to tell which one is the real me. If you just look it up and scroll some of my posts, you'll go, oh yeah, that's her. That's Rogue. There's Lenore.
And that was actress, singer, and former politician Lenore Zann. That's our show for this week, and remember, here at The Medley, we're all kinds of different.